The next night she dreamed of giving birth to their first child, and... Interruption. And hey, how about giving old Morgenstern credit for a major league fake out there? I mean, didn't you think for a while at least that they really were married? I did. It's one of my biggest memories of my father reading. I had pneumonia, remember, but I was a little better now and madly caught up in the book. And one thing you know when you're 10 is that no matter what, there's gonna be a happy ending. They can sweat all they want to scare you, the authors. But back of it all, you just have no doubt that in the long run, justice is going to win out. And Wesley and Buttercup, well, they had their troubles, sure, but they were going to get married and live happily ever after. I would have bet the family fortune if I'd found a sucker big enough to take me on. Well, when my father got through with that sentence where the wedding was sandwiched between the minister's meeting and treasury whatever, I said, "You read that wrong." My father's this little bald barber. Remember that too? And kind of illiterate. Well, you just don't challenge the guy who has trouble reading and say he's read something incorrectly because that's really threatening. "I'm doing the reading," he said. "I know, but you got it wrong. She didn't marry that rotten Humperdinck. She marries Wesley." "It says right here," my father began, a little huffy, and he starts going over it again. "You must have skipped a page then. Something. Get it right, huh?" By now he was more than a tiny bit upset. "I skipped nothing. I read the words, and the words are there. I read them. Good night." And off he went. "Hey, please, no," I called after him, but he's stubborn, and next thing my mother was in saying, "Your father says his throat is too sore. I told him not to read so much." And she tucked and fluffed me, and no matter how I battled, it was over. No more story till the next day. I spent that whole night thinking Buttercup married Humperdinck. It just rocked me. How can I explain it, but the world didn't work that way. Good got attracted to good, evil you flushed down the John, and that was that. But their marriage, I couldn't make it jibe. God, did I work at it. First, I thought that probably Buttercup had this fantastic effect on Humperdinck and turned him into a kind of Wesley. Or maybe Wesley and Humperdinck turned out to be long-lost brothers, and Humperdinck was so happy to get his brother back, he said, "Look, Wesley, I didn't realize who you were when I married her, so what I'll do is I'll divorce her, and you marry her, and that way we'll all be happy." To this day, I don't think I was ever more creative. But it didn't take. Something was wrong, and I couldn't lose it. Suddenly there was this discontent gnawing away until it had a place big enough to settle in, and then it curled up and stayed there, and it's still inside me lurking as I write this now. The next night when my father went back to reading and the marriage turned out to have been Buttercup's dream, I screamed, "I knew it! All along I knew it!" And my father said, "So you're happy now. It's all right now. We can please continue?" And I said, "Go," and he did. But I wasn't happy. Oh, my ears were happy, I guess. My story sense was happy. My heart, too. But in my, I suppose you have to call it soul, there was that damn discontent shaking its dark head. All this was never explained to me till I was in my teens. And there was this great woman who lived in my hometown, Edith Neisser, dead now. And she wrote terrific books about how we screw up our children. Brothers and Sisters was one of her books. The Eldest Child was another, published by Harper. Edith didn't need the plugs. Seeing, like I said, as she's no longer with... let me start that over. I think I like the movie version of the grandfather reading the book. I do too, but the differences are intriguing. Yeah, I'm curious why they changed it. Like the grandfather, I mean, there is some difference, like that makes it maybe more cozy in a way, having the grandfather compared to having the father. Honestly, I think the book is a bit heavier. Yeah. Well, there is this whole thing in the beginning because there's two introductions, and I don't remember which one it is, but in one of them he talks about his father, and he says something like he was a barber and he just died alone, and it got really heavy. And so I think that character of the father is just in general a little heavier. And so replacing him with the grandfather does make it more lighthearted because it's a different character. Like, rather than rewrite the father to make him lighter, they just were like, well, let's use this other character instead. Which I think I like that, as opposed to being like, oh, well, this doesn't work for the movie, so we're going to change the character completely. Like, change the nature of who they are. As, I don't know. I think from an author perspective, you come up with a story, you have this idea of a particular character, and then if there's something that makes you change who that character is, it feels in a way like you're betraying them almost. But that's sort of putting myself into the author's perspective. I can understand from a production side just being like, oh, whatever, it doesn't matter, just change things to make it so that it sells movie tickets. But yeah, the framing. Well, there's a lot about the book that is heavier. I was gonna say just the framing mechanism, but the backstories and everything are as well. There is a melancholy undertone in the book that isn't in the movie. Yeah, it's just heavier in general, which is interesting because William Goldman is the one who adapted it for the film. So to have like enough self-awareness to be like, this is heavy and it's not going to sell movie theater tickets, so let's to know what parts to change. I think that takes a lot of skill and a lot of willingness to take apart your creation and put it back together again in a different way. Okay, I was stumbling over a sentence. Edith doesn't need the plug, seeing, like I said, as she's no longer with us. But if there are any amongst you who are worried that maybe you're not being perfect parents, pick up one of Edith's books while there's still time. I knew her because her kid Ed got haircuts from my pop. And she was this writer, and by my teens I knew secretly that was the life for me too, except I couldn't tell anybody. It was too embarrassing. Barber's sons, if they hustled, maybe got to be IBM salesmen, but writers? No way. Don't ask me how, but eventually Edith discovered my ambition, and from then on, sometimes we would talk. And I remember once we were having iced tea on the Neser porch, and talking, and just outside the porch was their badminton court, and I was watching some kids play badminton, and Ed had just shellacked me, and as I left the court for the porch, he said, "Don't worry, it'll all work out. You'll get me next time." And I nodded, and then Ed said, "And if you don't, you'll beat me at something else." I went to the porch and sipped iced tea, and Edith was reading this book, and she didn't put it down when she said, "That's not necessarily true, you know." I said, "How do you mean?" And that's when she put her book down and looked at me and said it. Life isn't fair, Bill. We tell our children it is, but it's a terrible thing to do. It's not only a lie, it's a cruel lie. Life is not fair, and it never has been, and it's never going to be. Would you believe that for me, right then, it was like one of those comic books where the light bulb goes on over Mandrake the magician's head? "It isn't," I said so loud I really startled her. "You're right, it's not fair." I was so happy. If I'd known how to dance, I'd have started dancing. Isn't that great? Isn't it just terrific? And I think along about here, Edith must have thought I was well on my way toward being bonkers. But it meant so much to me to have it said, and out, and free, and flying. That was the discontent I endured the night my father stopped reading. I realized right then. That was the reconciliation I was trying to make and couldn't. And that's what I think this book's about. All those Columbia experts can spiel all they want about the delicious satire. They're crazy. This book says life isn't fair, and I'm telling you one and all, you better believe it. I got a fat, spoiled son. He's not gonna nab Miss Reingold. And he's always going to be fat. Even if he gets skinny, he'll still be fat. And he'll still be spoiled, and life will never be enough to make him happy. And that's my fault, maybe. Make it all my fault if you want. The point is, we're not created equal. For the rich, they sing, life isn't fair. I got a cold wife. She's brilliant. She's stimulating. She's terrific. There's no love. That's okay, too. Just so long as we don't keep expecting everything to somehow even out for us before we die. Look. Grown-ups, skip this paragraph. I'm not about to tell you this book has a tragic ending. I already said in the very first line how it was my favorite in all the world. But there's a lot of bad stuff coming up. Torture you've already been prepared for, but there's worse. There's death coming up. And you better understand this. Some of the wrong people die. Be ready for it. This isn't Curious George uses the potty. Nobody warned me, and it was my own fault. You'll see what I mean in a little. And that was my mistake. So I'm not letting it happen to you. The wrong people die, some of them. And the reason is this. Life is not fair. Forget all the garbage your parents put out. Remember Morgenstern. You'll be a lot happier. Okay, enough. Back to the next. Nightmare time. Yeah, that is... that's more than melancholy. That's pretty dark. But also, I don't remember in the movie, I think Vizzini is the only one that I remember dying. And even that was just sort of like, it was poison and he just falls off screen. I don't know if, oh, well, I guess, I'm not going to spoil anything else. I can think maybe there's one other death in the movie that I'm thinking of, other than the expected, like, the king is gonna die. The next night, she dreamed of giving birth to their first child, and it was a girl, a beautiful little girl, and Buttercup said, I'm sorry it wasn't a boy. I know you need an heir. And Humperdinck said, Beloved, sweet, don't concern yourself with that. Just look at the glorious child God has given us. And then he left, and Buttercup held the child to her perfect breast, and the child said, Your milk is sour. And Buttercup said, Oh, I'm sorry. And she shifted to the other breast, and the child said, No, this is sour too. And Buttercup said, I don't know what to do. And the baby said, You always know what to do. You always know exactly what to do. You always do exactly what's right for you, and the rest of the world can go hang. And Buttercup said, You mean Wesley? And the baby said, Of course I mean Wesley. And Buttercup explained patiently, I thought he was dead, you see. I'd given my word to your father. And the baby said, I'm dying now. There's no love in your milk. Your milk has killed me. And then the child stiffened and cracked and turned in Buttercup's hands to nothing but dry dust, and Buttercup screamed and screamed. Even when she was awake again, with 59 days to go till her marriage, she was still screaming. The third nightmare came quickly the following evening, and again it was a baby, this time a son, a marvelous strong boy, and Humperdinck said, Beloved, it's a boy. And Buttercup said, I didn't fail you, thank heavens. And then he was gone, and Buttercup called out, May I see my son now? And all the doctors scurried around outside her royal room, but the boy was not brought in. What seems to be the trouble? Buttercup called out, and the chief doctor said, I don't quite understand, but he doesn't want to see you. And Buttercup said, Tell him I am his mother, and I am the queen, and I command his presence. And then he was there, just as handsome a baby boy as anyone could wish for. Close it, Buttercup said, and the doctors closed the door. The baby stood in the corner, as far from her bed as he could. Come here, darling, Buttercup said. Why? Are you going to kill me too? I'm your mother, and I love you. Now come here. I've never killed anybody. You killed Wesley. Did you see his face in the fire swamp? When you walked away and left him? That's what I call killing. When you're older, you'll understand things. Now, I'm not going to tell you again. Come here. Murderer, the baby shouted. Murderer! But by then she was out of bed, and she had him in her arms and was saying, Stop that this instant. I love you. And he said, Your love is poison. It kills. And he died in her arms, and she started to cry. Even when she was awake again, with 58 days to go till her marriage, she was still crying. The next night she simply refused to go to sleep. Instead, she walked and read and did needlework and drank cup after cup of steaming tea from the Indies. She felt sick with weariness, of course, but such was her fear of what she might dream that she preferred any waking discomfort to whatever sleep might have to offer. Hi there. Thanks for joining our book club. If you'd like to join the conversation, I would love it if you would leave us a comment. And if you'd like to see more, check out the playlist.